Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to the first Barnstable District Democratic Candidates Forum. I'd like to welcome you all here this evening. I also would like to welcome our panel, Matt Pitta from WQRC and John Basile from the Register Quantum. Okay, and our candidates from your left to right: Ian Ryan, Eliza Zawadzkis, and Alex Morris. I'd also like to recognize our timekeeper, Sandy Milano, from the Yarmouth Democratic Town Committee. Okay, with that, we will turn the debate over to the panel. Why don't we start? By the way, in order of speaking will be Alex Morris first, Eliza Zawadzkis second, and Ian Ryan third. And we'll start with our opening statements, 3 minutes. We'll start with Alex.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you for having me. I also want to thank the panelists for coming tonight. I also want to thank all the guests in the audience and all the guests at home tonight for watching. And I also want to take special thanks to Representative Turner for initiating these debates. I think that's really wonderful. My name is Alex Morris, and I'd like to be your next state representative. I grew up in Yarmouth, was educated in the DY school system, after which I received my bachelor's from Framingham State and my master's in political science from Northeastern University. I have a long history of progressive activism, and I'm a lifelong Democrat. I served the Cape representing them on the Democratic State Committee for 4 years. I was the vice chair of the Young Democrats of Massachusetts and even asked to restart the Young Democrats of Rhode Island. I've also spent many years working with the Massachusetts State House. I spent 7 years working with the State Commission, the Massachusetts Commission on Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgendered Youth, working to advocate at the State House for more funding for youth suicide prevention and comprehensive anti-bullying legislation. We need a state representative who's ready on day one. My time serving with the Democratic Party and working with the legislature on a state commission taught me a great deal about the State House. I know when to file bills so they'll be considered in committee, how to write priority lists so they'll be considered by ways and means so that our towns can get the funding they need, and understanding the general nature of bills and crafting of legislation. We need a state representative who can do this, and I'm ready on day one. I'm running because I cannot stand by and watch as our schools are continuously underfunded, our seniors struggle on fixed incomes, and our education and our environment is under constant attack. Tonight we're going to be talking about 4 wonderful issues: education, seniors, veterans, and the environment. I want to talk to you tonight about how our Chapter 70 funding formula is woefully inadequate for special needs funding, how our seniors, their senior citizen real estate tax credit is far too small. I want to talk to you tonight about how our veterans deserve a completely free education at our public colleges and universities. And I want to talk to you tonight about how we're just a few miles away from a very dangerous power plant that has been far past its deadline and is dangerous for every man, woman, and child on Cape Cod. That's why I'm running. That's why I need your vote September 9th. Thank you.
Eliza?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Bob, and thank you to the Cape and Islands Democratic Council for having this, and thank you all for being here tonight. And thank you to Cleon Turner for his dedication and his hard work and his commitment to serving this community. And a special thank you to my dear friend Amanda, who wins the prize, I think, for coming the farthest to be here from Michigan. My college friend and teammate. I recognize how wonderful Cape Cod is, like all of you do, and I was fortunate to live here my entire life from the age of 5. My parents fell in love with the Wellfleet beaches. My mom worked at the drive-in, and they decided to move here. My mom started working at Nauset as a school teacher, and she's done that, recently retired for 25 years. And my father was courageous enough to hang a shingle and start his own practice in Orleans. And I'm fortunate that they chose to move the family here. I had a wonderful childhood. I've always been very active in sports. I was a very competitive tennis player early on, and then I took to basketball, where I continued, and I've learned so many valuable skills and lessons from basketball: leadership and teamwork and commitment and hard work. And that provided me the opportunity to attend Deerfield Academy for 2 years, following my father's footsteps and my brother's footsteps. And from there, I attended the College of the Holy Cross, where I did play basketball, and I was captain with Amanda my senior year. And I was a sociology major, and I knew from the get-go I wanted to help people who needed a step up in life, and I chose to attend law school for that reason, to find a way to advocate and to make a difference. And I attended New England School of Law in Boston, and after I graduated, I realized that I wanted to use what I've learned, those skills, to serve this community and to advocate for this community. And I've done that, and I've found a way to become involved more and more in this community by serving on the ZBA in the town of Dennis for the past 5 years, being involved in organizations like We Can and Cape Cod Young Professionals. Cape Cod is wonderful the way it is for a reason, because of our seniors. We owe it to them, and I want to be sure to advocate for them, to be their voice on Beacon Hill, to make sure that they live with integrity, or with I want to be a voice for them. I want to be a voice so they could live with the independence they need, and also for the young families. I want to support them to have a full life and support their education. I want to be the voice for them and all of you. I will fight hard for you and for your family and for this community. I appreciate your consideration and ask for your vote on September 9th. Thank you.
Next candidate, Ian Ryan.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Ian Ryan, and with your vote on September 9th, it will be my honor to serve you as your next representative for the 1st Barnstable District. I will carry on thanking Cleon Turner for his fine service in the last 10 years and for helping to put this series of forums together. And I'd like to thank all of you for coming out. Tonight, on one of the I think the 3rd Friday with sun since January, so it's good to see you. It's nice to compete with a nice day. It's also nice that you are actually engaged in the political process and here to listen to us and hear us out. I'm sure that my colleagues will agree with me here that as we're out canvassing, one of the most dispiriting questions we hear is what election? And once we get past the fact that there is an election, it's, well, what are you for? As if there's nothing going on. So, how about this? A whole generation's wealth has just been stolen by banks that bet against their own customers. And the insurance scam that they set up to win on the backside blew up in their faces, and we got to buy them out on top of all that. It sounds like a faraway problem, sounds like a national problem, sounds like something that can't get fixed in the 1st Barnstable District. But it's a problem that carries over in our entire political culture. For example, we have new flood maps going into effect on the 16th of July, just next month. We have a flood insurance program which is supposed to help homeowners pay for home insurance. It's recently been modified so that it can only cover, or it may only cover, a mortgage. So what started as a program to help homeowners has turned into a mortgage insurance program that only homeowners have to pay. So that is not a national problem, it's a local problem, and as we move into coming out of this recession, we have an opportunity to change the parameters in which we operate. We have the opportunity to change our political discussion, we have the opportunity to change the rules of the way we operate so that people who work for a living get to work for a living. They deserve to work, they deserve to make a living. And being poor is not a crime, working for a living is not a crime, expecting to be compensated for your time is not a crime. And we need to change our political conversation. I didn't even get to talk to myself because I got so upset about this, but was introduced tonight as a lawyer. I am one. I became a lawyer as a second career because I got tired of watching the law hold people down instead of lift them up. I spent most of my adult life being propelled by an excellent public high school education. That's something, and I took advantage of veterans benefits to complete my education, and I look forward to talking about those things in more detail tonight. Thank you.
Now we will turn the forum over to the panel. The panel will ask each of the candidates a question. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond, and then the panel will have a chance to do a follow-up question. And again, candidates will have 2 minutes to respond. We'll start with John Basile.
Okay. My question for all of you really is, we've seen the financial impact on local and regional school districts caused by the high cost of out-of-district placement for special needs students. Is there anything that the legislature or a single state representative can do to assist school districts with these high costs?
Start with Ian.
Yes, there is. We have 3 school districts in the district here. Can one representative do something? One representative can enter a bill. There is a problem with the way we manage our schools, in that we require them to spend the foundation budget, which really should just be called the minimum budget, but then we require them to pay for the entire cost upfront of special education for any student who comes into the door. So we have actually conflicting laws. You must spend a minimum amount, and that's how much you have in the bank, but if anyone else comes in looking for a special education requirement, you have to pay it out of your current budget and be reimbursed in the future. There is a facility in the laws for school districts to start revolving funds. I think what the state should do is prompt school districts to open those funds, fund them, and let school districts borrow from them so that they can keep their current budgets, and then repay it into the revolving fund after they are reimbursed from the state the following year. Again, just to keep this clear, school districts are required to pay out of current funds for any student who comes in, but doesn't get reimbursed until the following year. If we have that revolving fund, one there's already a facility in the state law for, we just need the state to fund it. Thank you.
Elisa.
Thank you. This is a great question. I come from a family of educators. My mother, as I mentioned, and my sister is an assistant principal, and my grandparents were public school educators. I've been a lifetime learner, and I've seen what good work Cleon Turner, Representative Turner, has done and the value he's given to education in this district, and I certainly want to follow in those footsteps. And to answer your question, I think that there are a few things that could be done as a legislator. For one, I think I would continue to educate the other legislators, as Representative Turner has, just how unjust Chapter 70 school funding is for our community. Essentially, we are discriminated against because we are a tourist-based economy. The only allies we have are those in the Berkshires, where because they use our property value and not our income to determine how much funding we should get, that the urban communities benefit, but we don't. And it's not an easy task because we are in the minority, but to continue to put the pressure on to educate them. Further, I think as the population continues to decline, we have to continue our efforts of regionalization, and that should be a significant focus. And further, I did talk to Superintendent Woodbury about the budgeting issues, and one thing is they're required to make the budget prior to knowing what unanticipated costs come in. So if they have an unanticipated number of students with colossal needs, it's really a tough pill to swallow. So if there is some sort of reserves to kind of lessen the blow, kind of how Representative Turner has put into place post-employment fund, something like that I think is worth some discussions, and I would encourage those conversations.
Thank you. Alex.
There's a lot of issues going on with Chapter 70 funding. First and foremost, when it comes to special education overall, the Mass Budget Policy Center found that it actually underfunds the entire state by $1 billion. This is a huge issue both for out-of-district placements and in-district placements. One of the reasons this occurs is because Chapter 70 was designed to discourage schools from identifying students with special needs, because everywhere else in the foundation budget is done on a per-student level. Only with special needs is it done by a percentage assumption, 3.75% roughly for in-district special needs and 1% for out-of-district. Now, they have done a circuit breaker funding to try and alleviate that, but at the end of the day, they're still not doing it on a per-student level, and they're still ignoring many of the costs dealt with for special needs. And in-district special needs has been a major problem. You know, when the number of people with IEPs in schools haven't gone up for those, that's individual learning analysis, but the severity has gone up for our students. Since 1998, there were only about 600 people diagnosed with autism in our schools. Now there's over 10,000 students with autism. I remember when I was a substitute teacher at DY, I got my first assignment at the WAVE program working with an autistic student. They're wonderful children that need a lot of additional care. I remember dealing with my student. They said, it was my first day, they gave me a walkie-talkie. I'm like, why do I need a walkie-talkie? They're like, oh, your student is a runner. I'm like, what did that mean? He might go out and run at any point. That means that student constantly needs some supervision and support. These are very expensive costs. The only way to deal with them is to first get the foundation formula accurate, and then we can start looking at the revenue we need to support it.
Thank you. Mr. Basile, do you have a follow-up question?
No, that's fine.
Mr. Taylor?
Thank you, Bob. Let's stay with education for a moment. Specifically, two of the big towns in this district, Dennis and Yarmouth, find themselves at odds again over the regional school budget. This week in this room, we saw the chair of the Board of Selectmen say there's no leadership right now on the DY School Committee. The DY School Committee says they're not going to budge on their budget. What, if any, role would you as the legislator for this district try to do to bring those two towns together on this issue as they head for perhaps another one of these so-called tent meetings where it really just puts the two towns at odds in regards to the funding formula for the DY school district?
We'll start with Elisa.
Sure. I think I've gone to a lot of the meetings, and there is that tension, and I think it's something that we're always going to be dealing with. The school budget is always going to be an issue, and I think that I would, as a legislator, the selectmen and the finance and the school committee, they're all working hard to find the best solution, and it would be my role. It is a local issue, and I would want to know exactly how it burdens the individuals and what impact it has, and speak to the superintendents. But at the end of the day, the voters make the decision, and I would work towards kind of smoothing the feathers to make sure everybody understands the other's position, because we all want what's best for the district as a whole, is to get the best education for as many students as possible. And that's the role I would see as the legislator, is much like how Cleon Turner, Representative Turner, has had such an active role in these discussions, and I certainly would as well, and be interested in learning more of the details on these issues.
Thank you. Alex?
I think this is an important issue, because if anyone remembers being at the 2008 tent meeting, it's terrible. It's a 10-12-hour ordeal, and quite bluntly, the numbers when it comes to how people will probably vote favor the school budget. So I would just tell both towns, you're going to end up getting a compromise, and the voters are probably going to push the money towards the school system, as we did in 2008, and Yarmouth had to find a way to make it work. And I think they're going to have to find a way to make it work again. We have to fund our schools properly. There's really no way around it. Students with special needs need certain minimal cares. Our school has certain funding issues that you just can't get away from. You have to have X amount of teachers just to have any decent form of education. It's going to cost money on this. So I would try and work with the towns to get them to come to an agreement before that sort of meeting. And then as a state representative, what I could do at the general court, it all comes down to revenue. We've got to push to have more revenue in our schools.
Thank you, Robin. Ian?
I would echo what each of my colleagues has said. One is it is a local problem. Local funding is the local issue. And second, there needs to be more state support for school systems generally. So I agree with those 2 points. I would, as a representative, acknowledging that the problem has to be solved by selectmen and school committee members, eschew a bully pulpit and instead try and use my position straddling both towns to mediate. I mentioned in my introduction that I became a lawyer as a second career, and the focus of that practice has been in mediation. The reality about Dennis-Yarmouth is they both have the same goal. Their positions may be separate, but their interest is the same. No one involved in this process doesn't want to educate children. And yet by the time it gets to a tent meeting, there's a lot of ill will being passed around about whose fault it is that you're there at all. And it really does come down to leadership and having a difficult conversation first. Things happened, like the Yarmouth Town warrant printed before the Dennis selectmen had come up with the final number, based on assumptions, based on relationships between the towns, which are generally good. But the fact is, it is a leadership issue where you simply have to get all the ducks in a row in order to stop that feeling of ill will in advance. So good planning, and again, as a representative in general court, it wouldn't be my place to come in and tell anyone how to run their particular town or their particular school system. I certainly would offer myself as a mediator in that position because I have the training, I have the experience to identify the difference between an interest and a position, and I'd be happy to offer myself in that capacity to serve.
Thank you. Mr. Tibbet, do you have a follow-up?
I'm all set, thank you.
Mr. Lucille?
I'd like to ask a question about style. Some state representatives are known for constituent service. Some are known for taking on causes and proposing big legislation. Others are policy wonks. Where might you fit into that spectrum if elected?
Well, yes, I'm guilty of being accused of a policy wonk, and that's what I tend to do. In order to get things done at the State House, you need to know specifics, you need to know facts, and you have to have you and your team push that. But you can't be a single-minded state rep to get things done. You have to work on many different issues. Constituent services is a big issue. When I've talked about in my opening the real estate tax credit for seniors, not many people know that they can take advantage of that. You know, that's $1,030 up to that you're eligible for as senior citizens. And one thing my job would be with constituent services is making sure my seniors know they have access to that. And then once I get into the State House, is fighting to get that tax credit to be expanded. There is no reason that we can't expand that tax credit. We just need to start doing more progressive income taxation. If we just move it so that we have the rich paying their fair share, we're able to provide more for those that need it most.
Well, the first duty of any representative is constituent services. It's a service position. You have to pick up the phone. You're here to make things happen for people who live and work here. That's the first thing I would do when I walked into the office. It would be the last thing I did before I left the office. In the middle, it would be, for me, what I talked about in the introduction. Changing the tone of political discourse. Making the conversation work. I'm not afraid to have difficult conversations. I'm not afraid to change, to take on a difficult issue like the Dennis-Yarmouth Bass River School Wars here. You have to sit down and have a really frank conversation with someone, and sometimes politicians are so careful they don't actually get anything done. So that's definitely not me. I would be about willing to negotiate particular policy points, but every single piece of legislation has got to match our values as a community. So that's what I would be doing in between constituent services and ending the day with constituent services. Thanks.
Thank you. Elisa?
Thank you. I really appreciate this question. No brainer, constituent services. I've been a trial attorney for almost 8 years now, advocating for people in courts all over this county, in the district courts, the family and probate, the superior courts, literally in court every day. And what appeals to me about this position is to, with my job right now, when I represent a client, I see the different issues and then the case is closed. And what I want to do is help on a broader scale and make systematic changes and draft legislature and be part of the legislative process to make systematic changes to help people. And so the idea of being able to help on a broader scale, but my number one priority would be to be available to the individuals, to be accessible, to have office hours. So it's the combination of both, which is very exciting to me. And because I'm from here, because I think in order to be an effective leader, it needs to be meaningful to you, and it would be to me, because I went to school with the business owners, I went to school with the fishermen, I represent the people in this community. I've already been fighting for them. And to have the opportunity to fight for them on a broader scale is so exciting to me. And so I see my job as a public servant, and that is why I want to be a state representative. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Trader?
Thank you. We'll talk a little bit about the environment here and the economy. In many ways, in large part, the Cape's economy is about the environment. On a legislative level, what would each of you do on Beacon Hill regarding legislation that would impact us here in the Cape that protects the environment, but while at the same time allows us to have a growing economy here?
We'll start with the answer.
The biggest problem we need to face head-on is wastewater here on the Cape. It is a problem that we ignore at our peril. It affects the quality of life about every aspect of our seasonal economy, of our year-round economy, of our residences, or our businesses. Absolutely need to get behind the county's 208 plan, which is just now out, and make sure that the resources are available to make that happen watershed by watershed, including alternative and innovative things like shellfish programs, keeping estuaries dredged and clear, and hooking up to common systems without breaking our economy. It's an expensive proposition. The last thing I read was that it might cost as much as $3.8 billion over 50 years. It's an extraordinary amount of money, but if we don't do it, consider the consequences. We have one single aquifer, except for one little area in Falmouth, which is served by a reservoir. All the rest of us drink water that comes out of the ground from the same aquifer. 85% of our waste also flows through the same ground. We need to take care of it first and last. There's no difference between that and securing our economy. You can't have a hospitality economy where the toilets don't flush. You can't have a hospitality economy where people don't go to the beach. You also can't have a vibrant year-round economy where people are paying for water to be trucked in. So for me, it's a no-brainer. It's the first and last issue we need to deal with. Thank you.
Thank you. Elisa?
Yes, thank you. Wastewater is a significant threat to this tourist-based economy, and a destination place at Cape Cod where people want to come for vacation and they want to retire. If we have dirty water, they're not going to come. And so it's not just an environment issue, it's an economy issue that needs to be dealt with. It needs to be dealt with. We need the federal and the state support to decrease the burden it's going to have on the individual people in this town. So it needs to be approached colossally as a Cape. And I hear Senator Wolf say this all the time. When you say, oh, I'm from Dennis, people are saying, where? But if you say we're from the Cape, you have a better response. And because the rest of the state needs the revenue that we provide, so it is their issue, and we need to make them realize that more in order to get the funding we need to deal with this problem. Any increase in taxes or expenses, I do think that we need to be cognizant of the fact that there are many seniors on fixed incomes. So we do need to be thoughtful about what we're doing, and I think we are. We're taking steps in the right direction, and we do need smart and creative approach, because each town has their unique issues, and each town needs to collaborate with the abutting towns, because the water isn't a town specific. So we need to approach it in a local way and also in a regional way, but that is certainly the most significant environmental issue. But I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan?
Thank you. There are many important environmental issues facing the Cape. First and foremost, we are dealing with wastewater. You know, there's no way around it, and I'm glad that Mr. Ryan did speak about the specific numbers, because we do need to understand it's costly. You know, the biggest thing that's going to be affecting us is we're going to be having sewers in more parts of Cape Cod, and there's just no low-cost way of doing that. There are a few things the state can do on the issue. The State Treasury Department does have the Wastewater Abatement Trust, which provides low-interest loans around 2%, which can help spread the cost over many years on water bills so that it doesn't affect us as harshly. You can try and delay plugging in to the sewer system, maybe when the house is changed over. So if someone is living in a house, they can try and get a waiver until they decide to sell the house. And those are very important issues. And the thing a state rep has to do is fight for revenue. It's really the biggest and most important thing a state rep has to do, is fight for revenue for our towns. There's also another very important issue facing Cape Cod, and that's we are just 40 miles away from a nuclear power plant that was only designed to last for 40 years. It's at year 42, and they wanted to go for another 18. It's had emergency shutdowns, it's had issues of groundwater issues, and the most scariest thing I learned from the Cape Downwinders, who are here tonight, and I thank them for coming, by the way, is the spent fuel rods. Their pool was designed for 800 rods. It's supposed to go down like this, just one at a time. Now there's 3,000 something in there, and they're stacked like this in racks. That's very dangerous. That's a very immediate issue, and wastewater is a very long-term issue. So we have both the immediate and the long-term issues facing us, and I plan on working on both.
Thank you.
I'll follow up. On this issue, as I'm sure you know, this town, Yarmouth, has already rejected a big pipe plan a couple of years back now. So where are each of you on what you think should happen in this district? Are you sold on the big pipe? Or, for instance, in Mashpee, just a couple of weeks ago, they are going to move ahead with a shellfish propagation program that they think can make a very significant impact on their nitrogen problem. So where do you stand? Are you willing to look at some of these alternative technologies? There's a composting toilet program in Underway and Falmouth, et cetera. So where are you on that spectrum of how you would like to see wastewater dealt with?
You want to pick that up, Alex?
Sure.
You know, I'm open on whatever works, but, you know, when you look at it, you're going to still have at least some degree of sewering on Cape Cod. I know Barnstable is moving some of their sewage into certain parts of Yarmouth for people, because I was talking to one of the activists from Barnstable about that recently. And I know that they are trying other measures, but I think what's going to happen is we're going to see more sewers. You've seen that in Chatham, you've seen that in Barnstable area. And I think that in our district we will start seeing some over the next 50 years.
Ian?
The 208 plan that was just published by the county includes 1,500 sites in the district alone, just in those 3 watersheds, that are eligible for alternative programs. And so as a legislator, what I think my job would be to do is to be an advocate to loosen regulations so we could do things like shellfish propagation as a wastewater management issue. There are conflicting regulations right now between fishing and property rights and how it's used. We need to get waivers so that we can do experimental programs, see if they're working, and then go with them, or if they're not working, switch over. 2 big things we need to decide as a Cape is how green our lawns have to be. Because adding nitrogen fertilizers is right off the bat one thing we could do, and it would start tomorrow, changing the content of our embayments ultimately. But the approach to the problem has to be comprehensive. It can't just be one giant sewer. The cost, when you look at the neighborhoods we have, of running 5 miles of pipe out to one house is simply not practical. The plan that I've seen so far, which I think is the best one, hooks about 46% of households and businesses up to common systems, whether they're common septic systems or alternative systems or common sewers. And it leaves the other households, they're either out in areas where the nitrogen issue can be dealt with individually house by house, or you can do something like composting toilets or fertigation, which is using waste water from individual septic systems as fertilizer to avoid that double dose. Thank you.
Thank you. Elisa?
Yes, thank you. The approach does need to be thoughtful and creative, and it needs to be not a one-size-fits-all. I looked at some of the 208, and it's complicated and it's complex, and I'm not an engineer. I would need to know a lot more information about what impact it will have on the community, what the cost will be, and people are having these conversations, and I would need more information to make a decision on what the best approach is. But what I would say is that I think one aspect of it is I certainly would support the aquaculture, and that's a win-win. It's a great, it helps the environment, it helps the economy, and that's a small part of it, but that's something that I would be very supportive of for many reasons. But the wastewater issue, well, I think I answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Basile?
The Dennis-Yarmouth School District is struggling with retaining students. Choice and charter tend to draw students away from the district. It's been a problem for several years now, and various programs within the schools have been tried, but the problem persists. Do you have any thoughts on what might be done to reverse this trend?
Let me start with Mr. Ryan.
I understand that the population is dropping generally, most severely among young people who tend to have young families with children in the district. So we have a general population decline in family-aged people, and that's taking kids away from our schools. We have to start budgeting in a way that acknowledges that our schools are getting smaller, and we're going to have to work with differing models of regional programs. We're seeing it happen already, and we just have to, again, have that difficult conversation right up front. This is how we're going to have to deal with smaller schools. You know, we have to get out in front of the problem instead of ignoring it and blaming it on, for example, charter schools or school choice. Charter schools get kind of a bad rap. They are public schools. They do draw students away, but our public schools are also compensated for 3 years after they've left. School choice, I think, I really don't understand school choice, except that voters went for it, and that's the program. We need to enrich our schools with proper resources, get them out of teaching to the test. Moving from MCAS to the new PARC program may have some effect on that, I hope. Enriching schools with programs that include arts, again, as well as science, technology, engineering, and math, adding arts. And generally, it's a revenue problem. Money won't always solve the problem, but again, when you look at our civil discourse about schools in Dennis and Yarmouth, we are almost completely consumed with a conversation about how little we can do for our public schools. We never get to the conversation about how well we're doing for our public schools. So again, it has to do with making a change in our public conversation about public schools.
Thank you. Mr. Morash?
All right. It does always come back to revenue when you're dealing with school funding. You know, our Chapter 70 Foundation formula budget was created in 1993, and still they have not done major revisions. Even in 2007, they nipped at it, they didn't do much. We underestimate for the entire state $1.1 billion in healthcare costs for our schools. Let alone before we even get into school choice, we have $1 billion in special needs that's not noticed and $1.1 billion in healthcare costs. So before we even get into charter schools, we already have a $2.1 billion hole we have to look at. And we need to have the foundation funding formula updated. We need to have a foundation formula commission reestablished as the Mass Teachers Association has suggested. Now, when it comes to charter schools specifically, charter schools and school choice placements have left DY losing over $4 million. So that there is a huge revenue gap from that. And I'm a supporter of school choice, actually. I think if you feel, you want to go to a different high school, that's fine. I've seen when I was in high school at DY, some kids that choice worked for them, and other kids that came to DY, and that's fine, because you're going from one school to another, and there tends to be some cross-pollination between the two schools. Charter schools, on the other hand, really are designed in such a way to just suck money out of our school systems. It's terrible. We think we have it bad here. It really hit me when I looked at Boston's numbers. Boston would normally receive about $200 million in state aid for a little over 60,000 students, 65,000 students. 7,500 of them go to charter schools. So the state takes away $88 million. That's terrible. I found that in the Boston Globe a few weeks ago. It's terrible that these sorts of money. We need to get back to investing in our schools and start moving away from charters and back to public education.
Thank you. Mr. Watson?
Yes, thank you for this question. The population is decreasing, and one organization I'm part of is the Cape Cod Young Professionals, and they just this week launched the Shape the Cape initiative, which I've been a part of. And in some of the facts that they found was that in the last decade, 25% of the people 25 to 44 left the Cape. That was 15,000 people. So one way to approach this issue is to remove the barriers to have more young families come back to the Cape. And there's a lot of creative ways to do that, and that's what this initiative is about. And they received a $50,000 grant to work towards doing just that, to make the housing more affordable, to make better paying jobs, and to have there be more career advancement in the jobs they have, because they found that those were some of the reasons that young families and young people were leaving. So in the meantime, as we continue to try to attract and engage young professionals to stay on the Cape, which is something that I'm very passionate about, the school district now, I think we need to continue our regional efforts. I know Representative Turner worked hard for getting funding for regional transportation, and that's been effective, and we need more of that and other efforts, because we are because of the population decreasing until we can get more people there, which is the great goal, we do need funding, and I think approaching more creative ideas similar to regional transportation are the types of things that we should be trying to come up with.
Thank you. I think we'll go back to Mr. Peter.
Thank you, Bob. Give you kind of a potluck question here, not topic specific, and I'll allow you to see where you go with this. If each of you is elected, or whichever of you is elected in the November general election, if you are elected rather, what would be the first piece of legislation that you would either be filing or co-sponsoring right away when you arrive there? So basically, we're looking to see what would be your immediate priority in terms of a piece of legislation if one of you is elected.
Start with
I think one of the most important is recommissioning a foundation formula commission. That is a really important issue. There's a lot of other people talking about it. It needs to be worked on. We are not looking at our schools funding properly. Even since the very beginning of the foundation formula was first put into action in 1994, they didn't put into account the inflation from their numbers from 1993 to 1994, and ever since then, it's skewed our numbers. And I've already talked about so many other issues that are wrong with the foundation formula budget. That would be the first piece of legislation. We've got to look at it, we've got to look at those numbers, and start seeing how our schools are actually spending their money so we can better appropriate resources to them.
Mrs. Watson?
Yes. That's a great question that I haven't given much thought about. And I've met so many people with different interests while I've been campaigning, and it's been so exhilarating for me. And I've been involved with the Cape Cod Young Professionals and with We Can, and what I would be looking to talk to more people and have ideas and find out what the cost would be or the impact, but nothing as far as education, seniors, helping the young professionals with their tasks, veterans, I mean, you name it. It really is hard to say as a first-time new legislator, it's as far as just drafting a bill, and I can't tell you right now. I have one particular one in mind, but I'd be excited I'd certainly be open to hear pitched. I would say that those are some of the areas that come to mind for me.
Mr. Ryan?
Well, first, I would cut Mr. Turner a break. He's had this bill that's been rolling around the legislature for 10 years, and we may not even have any interest in it at all. It has to do with how to constitute a homeowners association in order to, where there isn't one, in order to deal with common facilities, like a neighborhood that happens to own a beach and something happens that needs to be fixed. Nobody cares about that. That's why it's taken 10 years to get it done. But I think Cleon Turner, after 10 years, probably could get a cheerleader to get in there. It's in the committee for the third reading now for a long time, and I don't know that it's going to get done by January or by July. That's for Cleon. For my purposes, the first bill I would take up as lead sponsor would be public accommodations for transgender people. That's something we dropped out of this last piece of civil rights legislation. It's an uncomfortable conversation to have, and we need to have it. We need to grow some backbone as Democrats and stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves. There simply aren't enough transgender people to vote in this law. We need to have the same kind of very difficult, very soul-searching conversation we had about equal marriage. I saw some people work, well-meaning, good-natured people work very hard to get through a very difficult issue when it came to equal marriage, and this is essentially the same thing. It has to do with whether we allow people who engage in commerce to deny the essential dignity of their fellow citizens. It's something the legislature dropped last session. It's something you take up next session with me. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bashir?
I want to touch on job creation, especially given the seasonal economy on the Cape, and with the influx of veterans returning from Afghanistan as that winds down. Is there something, do you see a role for a legislator in job creation?
We'll start with Elijah.
I'm
sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I think there's a lot of opportunities for job creation, and there needs to be incentives to start small businesses or that fit with the nature of the character of Cape Cod. And I think I'm sitting on the zoning board. It's been a great opportunity for me to see the having economic growth and then the balancing with preservation, and I think it doesn't need to be one or the other. And smart economic growth is with businesses, and maybe, and the other thing is again with the Cape Cod Young Professionals, and what they were talking about is more jobs. We're seeing it more where they don't have to live here necessarily, or online jobs, things like that, are just a few ideas that are coming to mind right now for me. Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Ryan?
Yes, legislator has a lot to do with creating jobs. As a legislature, we create the environment in which business operates. So essentially making a small business friendly culture, moving away from a big business friendly culture to a small business friendly culture, will help to grow jobs here on the Cape. I come from the hospitality industry. I work at a real estate agency called Cozy Cape Cottages that does seasonal rentals. So I understand the seasonal economy. I work with my husband Mark in the Corsair and Crossrip in the hospitality industry, a hotel. There is no dichotomy between the seasonal economy and a year-round economy. All of them pay us and feed us. One does not prevent the other, one serves the other. The obvious way to do this is to support things like raising the minimum wage and creating a business culture where we pay not just prevailing but living wages. Because people who are scraping by don't do things like go out to eat, shop in local shops. When they do go out, they go to big chain stores which are designed to pull profits out and put low-paying jobs in. So by creating that culture as a legislator, you can do that. Specific to veterans, there are excellent veterans benefits here in Massachusetts, which mirror and supplement those by the federal government. They have to do with housing and health care and income support. There's no reason we can't have another corollary program just like the Small Business Administration veterans programs. The Small Business Administration has programs specifically for veterans to start small businesses. There's no reason that Massachusetts can't have a complementary program to that one as well, especially here on the Cape. I am a veteran. I spent 6 years on active duty in the Army as a non-commissioned officer, and my own son is just back from Afghanistan. So the need for this kind of thing, this sort of reintegration into a welcoming community, is something we have to build intentionally and with purpose.
Mr. Moore.
I look at job creation and economic security as a three-footed stool. We need economic growth, which we're very fortunate that we're seeing that, but right now we're seeing a lot of that go to the top. What you need with economic growth is strong protections for workers' rights, union rights, a strong minimum wage law, and I'm very proud of the work that I and the Raise Up Mass Coalition did to get enough signatures to force the State House to work on that issue. We still have a lot of ways to go on that. We still haven't indexed it to inflation, and if I get up to the State House, the Speaker's going to have to deal with me pushing for that every day with him. But we also need to protect our families through programs, family assistance. Something that worries me so much is what Mr. Whalen has said on his website about the SNAP program. I'm worried about fraud in the system. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about making sure people have enough food to eat so they can get themselves up. Too often, our fellow Americans are drowning, and all that we're asking through something like SNAP and workers' protections, just get their head slightly above water. That's all we're asking. And yet our Republican opponents continue to attack the poor and working families. That's something I'll fight against. And then when it comes to veterans, we really have to talk about integration and health services. So many of our vets are dealing with post-traumatic stress issues and intense brain injuries. And I probably don't have enough time to talk about all of that in the next 30 seconds. So if there's any more questions on that, I'll be happy to talk about it.
Thank you. Mr. Pitta.
Thank you, Bob. We haven't heard a lot of disagreement between the three of you here tonight, so would each of you please distinguish yourself from the other two candidates and what makes you different and why Democrats and unenrolled voters who may take a Democratic ballot would want to vote for you over the other two candidates.
Mr. Watson.
Sure. Thank you. Great question. I'm the only candidate that has municipal experience. I've sat on the Zoning Board of Appeals for the past 5 years. I'm the only woman candidate, which I think that there are, women are underrepresented in the elected positions. We are over half of the population, but only 22% of the elected officials in Barnstable County are women, and it's even less on a state level. And I think that the elected positions need to better represent the population as a whole. I'm not saying it needs to be all women, because that wouldn't work either, but there should be the elected officials should represent the population as a whole or a goal. And also my trial experience. I have 8 years advocating for clients. So it's going to be skill set that translates to the legislature. So it's just the arena that's going to change. So instead of trying to convince a judge or a jury or a opposing counsel that I'm right, I'm going to be convincing the other legislators to support my bill or to understand where I'm coming from. My job in family law has also been a lot of negotiating and mediating and dealing with egos and dealing with different personalities. So that's what I've been doing, and I've built those professional skills. And also on the zoning board, it's a problem-solving committee, so we're hearing the issues of the individuals who come before me, and we're trying to solve that problem for businesses and for homeowners. So those aren't skills you pick up overnight, and I have those skills, and I would have those as a state representative.
Thank you. Mr. Muller.
What distinguishes me as a candidate is my desire to work on these issues for the poor, my desire to look at each piece of policy and the nuances, know the facts, be able to push as far as we can. I'm the experienced candidate, I'm the lifelong Democrat, and I am the passionate candidate for your vote. And I hope to get your vote this September 9th.
Thank you. Mr. Ryan?
I have no doubt that each of my colleagues up here is sincere, and I'm glad they're in the race. I think that my experience is broader and deeper than both of them. I am the only person up here who can talk about food stamps having had to resort to them. When I got out of the Army, I saved up enough money to live for 6 months and get out there and get the new job and be totally reintegrated, and I ended up falling flat on my face. And on the 8th month, there was simply no more money to feed me or my family. So when I go to the State House and I talk about things like EBT fraud or EBT benefits, I will actually be able to talk about it from my experience. In moving back to the Cape in 1999 from a corporate job at Boeing, which I got with a high school education, moving to the Cape and discovering there were no professional jobs, and being unemployed for a year and a half, and knowing what it feels like to be totally locked out of the local economy, but being able to use programs like the GI Bill, like student loans, like student loans and the GI Bill and benefits like that, which are under attack nationwide, and again here in Massachusetts. I have been able to start my own business. I've been able to marry and do very well for myself. I want to make sure that my story happens for someone else. And it will only happen for someone else if we can have a difficult conversation. And you can do more up there than be a checklist progressive. If a business owner asks you why he should support minimum wage, you have to be able to tell him more than it's the right thing to do. You have to say it's the right thing to do and it works for you for these reasons. From my experience, I can tell you. I have that experience, and I hope that I can count on your vote to send it to Boston. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lucille, I believe.
How do you view the workings of the Cape Cod Commission regarding economics and the environment, and how do you see the commission interfacing with the legislature, where one of you may very well serve?
Start with Mr. Ryan.
The Cape Cod Commission is unique in that part of its function is, for parts of its function, it reports directly to the state as the regional planning agency, and for parts of its function, it reports to our county government. The Cape Cod Commission is sometimes mistaken for our county government, and they're not the same thing. So, in particular, the Cape Cod Commission has done a terrible branding job in terms of how it approaches the business community, and it's sort of getting past that now. In cooperation with like the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce and doing the business overlays and setting up environments where it knows in advance that development can happen with limited regulatory impact, it is actually creating a welcoming environment for business in a way that it hasn't in the past. So it's made a really big turnaround. In terms of the state's relationship with it, as the regional planning agency, they're responsible for everything from chain stores to turtles. So there's a lot to go on there, and they're getting much better at it, and the state should help them to get better at it.
Thank you. Mrs. Wadsworth?
Yes, thank you. I don't see how the Cape Cod as a whole can address some of the issues like wastewater or transportation without a regional approach. I think they provide a lot of help. You see some of the schools like DY doing the school and having to agree on the budget and to count on. I heard one debate who was against Cape Cod Commission, and she was saying it needed to be the towns can work together, but that's a little optimistic, I think, and for such significant issues like transportation and wastewater, I don't see how it could be done without a regional base. And could the regional, how it performs, be tweaked? Absolutely, I'd consider discussions in that regard. And I think it's also been a resource for, I've spoken to a lot of selectmen about it, and it's a resource to them to educate them on issues for them to deal in their particular town.
Mr. Miller?
Regional planning is probably one of the most important things facing Cape Cod. Each town likes to do its own thing, but once in a while we do have to get together on certain issues. One thing that I really applauded the Cape Cod Commission for doing just a few months ago was saying no to the major Lowe's development they were proposing. We had an anti-union, low-wage employer trying to put another big box store in our communities, and they said no, and I applaud them for that. This has, of course, generated a lot of controversy over the last few months, and I've heard different proposals of what to do to the Cape Cod Commission. I've heard abolishing it, which I'm not for, but I've also heard people want elected commissioners, and they want to do this or that, and I'm open to that discussion. I think the Cape Cod Commission works currently, but if the voters were to put forth a change to the commission, we, as the next state representative from one of us, would have to support that in the State House, and I will support the voters on any changes they deem needed.
Thank you. By the way, if there were any questions from the audience, you needed to fill out an index card. I don't know if there's any room here that wants to fill out a card. Okay, we'll continue with the panel. I think we'll do 2 more rounds and we'll go into closing statements. The last question I believe was Mr.
All right. Well, 2 of you have opened up the door on the minimum wage issue. Let me ask you a question about this. We see that it's most likely going to go to $11 an hour over the next couple of years. If you're elected to this position and a business owner comes to you within this district and says, I understand that I'm going to have to raise the minimum wage, but each year my payroll budget is a finite number, and I cannot increase that. So I'm going to cut back hours, or I'm probably going to lay some people off. What do you say to that person when that business owner comes to you?
Mr. Wadsworth?
Sure, yes. I've spoken to Representative Turner a little bit about this, and it's interesting. A lot of the business owners on the Cape already pay more than the minimum wage, so it's not as colossally devastating to it. From my understanding, in the Chamber's response to the businesses on the Cape, which we're fortunate about, many of the businesses pay over the minimum wage right now, and which is great. But if it does affect them, what I would tell them is, there's so many small businesses here, and we have to. I would represent them and hear their interests, and I would be happy that I was asked the question, and I would want to have that discussion. But I think looking at it on a broader scale, when businesses are resilient and the wages haven't changed in so long, and there's a need for it, and it benefits the community as a whole when the money goes back into the system. And because it's been so long since it's increased, that it's only fair that it needs to increase. And much like when other significant changes have been made to labor laws, businesses survive, and it's not, you can't solve a problem for every single business, and it's not because you're insensitive to that specific business. But if it's as a representative, my role would be to address the issue for the entire district, and that's what my conversation with that business owner would be.
Thank you. Mr. Ryan?
I've already had this conversation, which is why you should send a business person to Boston. It's a difficult conversation to have, not because it's really going to impact business, but because we have this idea that labor and management are always at odds. To elaborate on what Ms. Watzka said more specifically, I can tell you from my own experience, the prevailing wage for housekeepers on Cape Cod is $11.97 right now in 2014. So the impact of going from 8 to 9, 9 to 10, 10 to 11 is going to be minimal. It's simply not going to affect the business community in the way that we have that conversation. So it's important to actually talk about the facts. There will be a change to some businesses who pay people seasonally or who actually do pay minimum wage workers. I would like to talk to them, because how you get someone to work for $8 an hour is a skill that escapes me. It's too much to work here. It's not enough to live and work here. But the fact is that minimum wage today has 44% of the buying power that it had in 1968. Meanwhile, between that period and now, worker productivity has doubled. So workers are getting 22% at minimum wage of what they have earned. And any business, frankly, I'll say this as an aspiring capitalist, as a business owner, any business owner who can't survive except by exploiting people that badly shouldn't be a business. That's what it comes down to. And if our pay structure changes, your job as a business person is to adjust to the environment and succeed. That's what the creative destruction of the free market is for. And just as the fastest growing city in the United States is Seattle. It already has the highest minimum wage in Washington State, and they're going to $15 by 2019. So it simply isn't true that raising the minimum wage will hurt business.
Thank you. Mr. Moran?
I actually had the exact opposite conversation with the business owner. I am good friends with John Niblock, who owns Hook's T-shirts in P-Town. And I was chatting with John, like, John, what do you think about minimum wage? I know you pay a good wage. How do you do that? He's like, said, Alex, when I look at all my costs for running my T-shirt shop in Provincetown, and the rents alone up there are absolutely insane. I don't know how they do that. But he said, whereas I pay someone $10 an hour, or now that I'm paying everyone $13 an hour to work for me, it's a very small minimum change to my bottom line. And I'm more than happy to support my workers to have a decent living wage. And let's be honest, $11 an hour isn't a living wage. Somewhere, once you start getting the $12, $13, $14, that's when you actually start getting into real living wages. So at $11, that's not a major increase for a lot of working people. What I will say is who these wage laws affect the most are big box stores. I hope it cuts into Walmart's bottom line, quite frankly. I think they get too much money. I think they need to give more of it to their workers. I hope this forces non-union hotels to pay a much better wage so they don't get to keep all the money for themselves. Those people are working hard. They deserve a decent wage. And as someone who has worked on low wages and who has had to apply for food stamps in his life, I am sick and tired of how those of us who aren't always rich are treated. And that's what I would say to any business owner about wages.
Thank you. I think the last question will be from Mr. Basile.
I think we've touched on this a little bit, but I'd like to narrow it down a little bit. As a state representative, what would be your vision for the first Barnstable district in terms of economic growth, particularly? Is it more outside investment in terms of, say, big box stores, or less of that sort of thing? Where do you see the district? How would it look a few years from now?
Mr. Ryan?
Well, if you go onto the Cape Cod Commission's website, you can see the overlays for environmental regulation, for business regulation, for watershed impact. The amount of new business, literally the amount of real estate available for new business, is severely limited. So we're approaching build out on the Cape, which means that we need to change from attitude of new building to an attitude of renewing. I know that small businesses make up the most effective engine for our economy, not just locally, but also nationally. And with better local wages for hospitality jobs, which is our primary industry, we will then begin to build the year-round economy that we want. Things like setting aside those 4 industrial lots and making a welcoming environment for our new businesses, putting things like light manufacturing into them will help to diversify the economy, but people aren't going to be available to take those jobs unless they have a living wage now, unless they have things like affordable education to get them qualified to work in them, unless they have things like affordable student loans or grants, or things like GI Bill or veteran support to get them there. Things that got me up out of the working poor. So the local economy is going to grow that way by putting programs in place to help people lift themselves up out of poverty and working poverty into things that we choose to do together, like investing in education, investing in jobs programs, and creating a planning program regionally, which the district by default will benefit from. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Lawson.
Yes, thank you. I would envision the first Barnstable district, Cape Cod, this way. We need more smart economic growth, and I would work towards removing the barriers that are prohibiting that. And what I mean by that is affordable housing, housing year-round, being able to advance in your career, and being able to have incentives to start a business on the Cape. I just had a reunion where a lot of NAWCET people got together, and I had a conversation with literally 3 or 4 people who want to live on the Cape but can't. They don't have a job that pays comparably to they're in Boston, or living here for July and August you have to live on someone's couch because the rent is so much more. And that's maybe fine if you're single, but if you're a young family, that's not an option. So there's a lot of barriers in place. We need to remove those barriers to make the next generation want to live here and work here, and also have opportunities for higher education. So smart economic growth and removing the barriers to get that growth.
Thank you. Mr. Morrow.
There's many different ways to try and attract economic growth to Cape Cod. I'm not opposed to all box stores. I am not always a huge fan of them. If they're a union shop, I'm a little bit more open to their business on Cape. If they're non-union and they're low wage, you know, I'm not comfortable with that coming to Cape. I don't think it actually provides an economic engine at that point. But the best way of attracting growth is year-round service people, professionals, see what we can get for them. It would be nice if we could move 4Cs from a 2-year college to a 4-year college. I would love to see that. There's been, I admit, we talk about that every few years, and we really need to take that more seriously. But also, the idea of more walkable communities. You know, you want young people to come here, you want young professionals. They like to be able to walk around a little bit more. And I like what they've been doing in Dennisport, creating that new little shopping area. One other thing I do to try and spur an economic engine is I've always been a big supporter of expanding the commuter rail to Bourne and then finally to Hyannis. And this is something that can be done. We do need to do work on South Station before we can do that, and we have to first wait for the implementation of the New Bedford line, but we will be able to have room to allow trains to come this far. And I think that would be wonderful for us. We don't need a third bridge with tolls. We don't have the infrastructure for all those cars, but we do have room for more people to enjoy walking around. And if they can go to Main Street, maybe even, there's even a proposal going all the way to Exit 7, make that a nice walkable shop area. That creates a lot of economic growth. And we've seen successes in places on Cape Cod. Provincetown is probably the most famous, and they don't have a train, they have a ferry. And I spent a whole summer up there, I loved it. People would just come off the ferry, they'd walk around, they'd enjoy the beaches, they'd spend far too much money, but that was great for all the shop owners there. And it was wonderful. I'd love to see us expand those sorts of walkable communities on Cape Cod.
Thank you. Before we get into closing arguments, I want to thank everyone for attending this evening. On behalf of the Yarmouth Democratic Town Committee, I want to thank the panel and, of course, the candidates. Closing arguments, we'll start with Alex, by drawing.
First up, thank you again, Bob, for moderating, and thank you to both of our questioners and panelists. Thank you again to everyone who came out tonight. It was really wonderful seeing you all, shaking your hand. And once again, thank you all for who viewed the entire debate on television. We talked a lot about a lot of wonderful and important issues tonight. We talked about the need to reform our foundation budget. We talked about how our seniors need to have access to a good, expanded real estate tax credit. We talked about how our veterans have important issues. I personally would like to see them have completely free education at our public colleges. Currently, they only get free tuition if they're not under the GI Bill, though the vast majority of our costs at a public college are mandatory fee related. I'd like to see that change. And I'd like to see us deal with our environmental issues, especially closing Pilgrim Power Plant. Thank you all again for coming out tonight, and I hope I have your vote this September 9th.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for being here tonight and considering me as a candidate for state representative. And thank you, Alex and Ian, for challenging me to make me a better candidate. I will use my skills, my education, my work ethic, my passion to advocate hard for you and to be a voice on Beacon Hill for you and for your family and for this community. I will be accessible now if you want to call and discuss anything with me, and also as your representative. I will have regular office hours, and as I said during the debate, my service to the constituents is my #1 priority. I'm from here, it's meaningful to me. I want to help and serve you, and that's the reason I'm running, and that's the reason I'm asking for your consideration. I invite you all to follow my campaign. It continues to gain momentum, and I invite you to be part of it and to I'm working very hard campaigning, and I will work very hard as a representative. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your consideration, and remember to vote on September 9th.
Okay. Thank you all for coming. I got cut off in my introduction, so I'm going to pick up where I left off. I'm joking. I did leave out a few things, and I want to go back to them. And you should know that as a representative, if I leave something out or make a mistake, I'm going to own it and come right around and tell you about it. First is that I left out that we have a dredge. The Barnstable County owns a dredge that was purchased with help from the state. It has trouble going from one side of the Cape to the other. And we need another one. We need a north side and a south side dredge. That will help us keep our estuaries clean, not just for transportation, but also to keep our estuaries clean. And second, I did say charter schools are public schools, and they need to behave like them and not like private schools with public money. Those are points I want to make pretty strongly. I have the kind of experience that can be applied to almost every situation that the people that I meet in everyday life, whether they're employees or employers, whether they're rich or poor, whether they're new to the Cape or been here many years, I have the kind of experience, because I've lived through it, that can relate their personal experience to what the proposed bills or laws in the legislature would be. I've gone from living hand to mouth, I've gone from needing public assistance to starting a business, to completing my education and going to law school, from turning a life with the burning shame of holding my hand out for help, to reaching out to other people to help them. I did that with things like affordable student loans, with the GI Bill with things that was called SNAP program then, is food stamps back. Called still food stamps now was, what is it? SNAP now, food stamps before. It is not a shame to work hard. And no one should be ashamed if they work for a living to expect not just to work but to make a living. We have important social investments to make, and we have a political conversation which tends to make us ashamed to stand up for who we are and where we came from. And I want to have that uncomfortable conversation. I want to have it for you. I want to make sure that my story is possible for every single resident of the 1st Barnstable District. And in order to do that, I will count on you to vote on September 9th and to vote for me when you get there. And I thank you for that in advance and for bringing someone with you. So thank you again for coming out. And again, I say it again, thank you for being engaged today in this process. I hope you'll get the word out however you feel about this forum, and that you'll attend the next where we'll have 3 different subjects to attack. Stay engaged, get your friends engaged, and please vote for Ian on September 9th. Thank you.
Thank you all, and thank you very much for the have a good evening.
Thank you.